You ever hit that point where someone just pushes you too far? That moment when patience runs dry and you decide, enough is enough? For me, that moment came when I stood watching Isabella Jones's spotless white Lexus SUV, dangling 10 feet in the air, held up by the giant forks of my sugarcane loader, while she screamed bloody murder from the driver's seat. Yeah, I know how that sounds. But trust me, she earned every second of it. My name's David Wilson, and 72 hours before that glorious moment of poetic justice, I was standing in front of 20 meters of destroyed fence. Tire tracks cutting straight from Isabella's driveway onto my land. She hadn't just bumped it by mistake. Oh no, this woman, the all-powerful president of our HOA, had rammed her luxury SUV straight through my fence at 6 in the morning, got out like she owned the place, and started snapping photos of my property. Her excuse? Property inspection. On my land. Land she had zero authority over. For 6 long months, I tolerated Isabella's power trips, the constant complaints, the threatening letters, the smug attempts to make me, a third-generation sugarcane farmer, follow her precious HOA rules. Rules that didn't even apply to my property. But when she destroyed my fence and then tried to fake evidence to steal my land, that was the line she should have never crossed. So, when I finally had her Lexus hanging in the air like a trophy, with my buddy Marcus, a retired cop, standing right there confirmed that everything I did was 100% legal, I'll be honest, I smiled. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you how Isabella Jones ended up begging to be let down from 10 feet above my farm, you need to understand the whole story, because this wasn't just about a fence. This was about a woman who thought power meant she could crush anyone in her way, and about the moment she found out she was dead wrong. But before we dive in, tell me this. Where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are right now? Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because, trust me, you want to hear how this ends. Now, let's rewind back to where it all began. The Wilson family farm has been in my blood since before I could walk. 50 acres of rich Louisiana soil, sun-baked and sweat-worked by 3 generations of Wilsons. My granddad bought the land in 1952 with every penny he had, built it from nothing into something that could feed a family. My father took it further, modernized it, and turned it into a profitable operation. When he passed 8 years ago, he left it to me with just one piece of advice. Son, don't ever let anyone take what we built. I've held on to those words through droughts, floods, and market crashes. But I never imagined I'd have to use them to fight off a homeowners association president with a God complex. See, the farm sits right on the edge of what used to be open countryside, until about 15 years ago when developers moved in and built Magnolia Heights, a picture-perfect neighborhood with manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, and rules for everything. No cars in driveways overnight. Grass trimmed exactly between 2.5 and 3 inches. Fences painted only in approved colors. You get the picture. Here's the thing, though. My farm's been here for half a century longer than Magnolia Heights. I was here first. And unlike those new homeowners, I never signed their covenant, never joined their HOA, never agreed to a single one of their rules. My property line runs right along their western border, but that line might as well be an international border for all the authority they've got over me. Most of the Magnolia Heights folks understood that. Good people, really. They'd wave when they passed, sometimes stopped by to buy sugarcane or asked about farming. We coexisted just fine, until Isabella Jones moved in 3 years ago. 52 years old, always impeccably dressed, driving that white Lexus RX like it was a throne on wheels. She had this look, chin tilted up, eyes narrowed, like she was silently judging her entire net worth. And within 6 months of moving in, she'd managed to get herself elected HOA president. And from what I heard through the grapevine, she ran that position like a queen ruling her kingdom. If you asked anyone in Magnolia Heights what kind of president Isabella Jones was, they'd probably say organized. But the truth? She ran that HOA like a military dictatorship. And the trouble? It started about 6 months before the fence incident. I remember the day clearly. I was out on the south field, spreading organic fertilizer. Yeah, the natural stuff, good for the soil, but not exactly perfume. That's when I saw her, Isabella, marching across my property in heels and a pantsuit, phone in hand, already mid-complaint. "Mr. Wilson, this odor is unacceptable," she declared, like she was delivering a court order. "The residents of Magnolia Heights have a right to enjoy their properties without this assault on their senses." I stopped the spreader, wiped my hands on a rag, and walked over calmly. "Ma'am," I said, "I appreciate the feedback, but this is a working farm. Has been since 1952. Fertilizer is part of farming. I use organic material, apply it during approved hours, follow every county regulation." She gave me that frosty smile. "I don't care about county regulations. I care about HOA standards. And this violates our air quality provisions." That's when I first explained it, politely, as clearly as I could. "Mrs. Jones, my property isn't part of your HOA. Never has been. Your rules don't apply here." The look on her face, it was like I'd slapped her. People who aren't used to hearing, "No, don't handle it well." She left without another word that day. But the next week, the letters started coming. Formal complaints about noise from my equipment, about my fence being aesthetically inconsistent, about my workers' trucks being commercial vehicles that violated parking restrictions, even though they were parked squarely on my land. I responded to each one the same way, polite, professional, with copies of my property deed, and a friendly reminder that her HOA's jurisdiction ended exactly where my fence began. But Isabella didn't back off. She escalated. She called the sheriff's department, twice, claiming my tractors violated local noise ordinances. Both times, deputies came out, tested the sound levels, and confirmed I was completely within legal limits. Then came the lawyer letter, some long, pompous document threatening legal action. My attorney sent a response so ironclad that we never heard from her lawyer again. But Isabella wasn't done. At the next HOA meeting, the one my neighbor Tom told me about, she apparently dedicated 30 full minutes to what she called the farm problem. Tom said she even brought a slideshow, photos of my property taken from the road, and proposed that the HOA collectively sue me to force compliance with their neighborhood standards. 3 board members immediately shut her down, calling the idea a waste of money and legally impossible. And that's when Isabella lost it. Looking back now, I should have seen what was coming. When people like Isabella can't win through official channels, they get creative. And by creative, I mean destructive. But at the time, I just brushed it off, kept working my land, minding my business, treating my neighbors with respect, thinking maybe someday she'd find a new target for her control issues. I was dead wrong. Monday, October 6th. That date's burned into my memory. I woke up at 5:30 like always, brewed my coffee, and headed out to check the irrigation system in the north field. The sky was painted in that soft purple-pink glow you only get in early fall. Everything felt calm, peaceful, until I rounded the corner to the east side of the property and saw it. 20 meters of my wooden fence, gone, not just damaged, destroyed. Posts snapped clean at the base, boards scattered like matchsticks, wire fencing ripped and twisted. And cutting straight through the wreckage, tire tracks, wide, deep, fresh. They led directly from the direction of Isabella's driveway onto my land, then looped back the same way. My first thought? Some drunk driver. Maybe. Happens out here sometimes. But then I saw the footprints. Small, neat women's shoes. They led from where the vehicle stopped, 20 feet into my property, then back to the tire marks. Deliberate, controlled. Someone hadn't crashed through my fence. They'd driven through it on purpose, gotten out, walked around, and left. I called the sheriff's office right away. While I waited, I went to the barn to check my security footage. Cameras I'd installed 6 months ago, right after Isabella's harassment started. Best investment I ever made. I pulled up the footage from 6 a.m., and what I saw made my blood run cold. At 6:04 a.m., a white Lexus SUV came into frame, creeping along the road. It paused for 10 seconds and then suddenly accelerated straight into my fence. The impact scattered wood everywhere. The SUV pushed forward 15 feet, stopped, and the driver's door opened. Out stepped Isabella Jones. Jeans jacket, phone in hand. She walked around in front of her car, taking photos of the damage of my land, of my equipment, like she was documenting her own crime scene. Then she actually stepped onto my property, snapping more pictures, muttering to herself the whole time. No audio, but you could see her lips moving, like she was narrating her own twisted justification. 5 minutes later, she got back in the Lexus, backed out through the hole she'd made, and drove away. This wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, calculated, and she documented it herself. 20 minutes later, Deputy Rodriguez, young guy, good head on his shoulders, showed up. He'd been out before, thanks to Isabella's noise complaints. I showed him the footage. His jaw actually dropped. Mr. Wilson, that's vandalism, destruction of property, trespassing. You want to press charges? Absolutely. He photographed the scene, copied the video, and said he'd file a report for the DA. Damage estimate, about $300. Not catastrophic, but far from minor. And then, at 8:17 a.m., my inbox chimed. Sender, hoa.magnoliaheights@gmail.com subject. Notice of violation. Immediate action required. I opened it, and my hand started to shake. Dear Mr. Wilson, during a routine boundary inspection this morning, the Magnolia Heights HOA has determined that your fence structure along the eastern border. The violation notice email from Isabella read, like it came straight out of a bad courtroom drama. Your property line is encroaching upon the public sidewalk easement by approximately 18 to 24 inches along a 60-foot section. This constitutes a violation of County Code March 2nd, 47 regarding obstruction of public access. Attached were a dozen photos, all taken that same morning, during her little joyride through my fence. Each one carefully framed to make it look like my fence was the problem. Angled shots, close-ups, fake evidence, all designed to sell her story. She'd even signed herself, full of that smug HOA authority. Per Magnolia Heights HOA and county easement regulations, you're hereby required to remove the encroaching fence structure within 48 hours. Restore the public easement to county standards. Submit replacement fence plans for HOA review. Failure to comply will result in a $500 fine and legal action. Regards, Isabella Jones, President, Magnolia Heights HOA. It was unbelievable. She destroyed my fence, trespassed onto my land, and then sent me a legal notice demanding I remove the very fence she just wrecked, under a completely fabricated law. Fraud, extortion, trespassing, vandalism, all before breakfast. I pulled out my property survey, the one I'd had professionally done 3 years earlier when I refinanced the farm. And sure enough, my fence sat 3 feet inside my boundary line, exactly where it was supposed to be. The so-called public sidewalk she mentioned, that was a gravel walking path inside Magnolia Heights. On their property, not mine, and definitely not public land. That's when it hit me. Isabella wasn't trying to make me follow rules. She was trying to take my land. She knew she couldn't force HOA regulations on me legally. So she created a fake crisis, a violation that didn't exist, using the fence she destroyed as proof. Once I tore it down to comply, she'd probably claim the boundary was unclear or that my land had encroached on HOA property. Then she'd start some bogus boundary dispute to chip away at my ownership. It wasn't about noise. It wasn't about aesthetics. It was about control. I called my lawyer, Bill Henderson, the same man who handled my father's estate and knew every inch of this land. I sent him everything, the email, the video footage, the property survey. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. David, Bill said, his voice tight with disbelief. She's committed about for crimes before 8 a.m., vandalism, trespass, fraud, and filing false evidence. And she put all in writing. He paused, exhaling hard. Here's what we'll do. I'll send a cease and desist immediately, and we'll file a civil suit for damages and a restraining order. How long will that take? I asked. 6 months. Maybe longer. The courts are backed up. 6 months. 6 months of Isabella thinking she'd gotten away with it. 6 months of her scheming, plotting her next move. I looked out the kitchen window at my grandfather's fields, golden and still in the morning light, and remembered my father's words. Don't let anyone take what we build. She thought I was just a simple farmer, someone she could push around with titles and threats. She thought wrong. That afternoon, I sat down and started thinking. Not angry thinking. Strategic thinking. The kind my grandfather did when planning crop rotations or outsmarting storms. Because I knew the truth. If this went through the system, she'd walk away with a slap on the wrist. And people like Isabella, they only learn when they face consequences that hurt. Real, personal consequences. That evening, I called Marcus Hayes, a retired sheriff's deputy and an old high school friend, a man who knew the law inside out, but also understood when it bent under real-world pressure. Marcus, I said, I need your perspective, legally speaking. I laid out everything, the fence, the footage, the email. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Then he said, Dave, you've got her dead to rights. Rodriguez will file a solid report, but she'll wiggle out of it with fines and probation. People like her always do. He paused, voice low. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about property rights. I said slowly, about what I'm legally allowed to do on my own land if someone's blocking my operations. Marcus chuckled knowingly. You're planning what I think you're planning? Maybe. I just need to know it's legal. All right, he said, Louisiana property law is clear. You have every right to operate your agricultural business on agricultural land. If a vehicle is parked on your property without permission and it interferes with your work, you can move it, tow it, relocate it, whatever it takes, as long as you don't damage it. He paused again. Farm equipment counts. You can use a tractor, loader, anything. I've seen farmers move cars blocking barns before. Totally legal, as long as the vehicle's trespassing. My mind was already working through the logistics. What if, I asked, the owner's inside the vehicle when it's moved? Marcus actually laughed. Even better. Shows you gave them the chance to move it themselves, and they refused. Just make sure you've got witnesses, and cameras rolling. He paused before hanging up. Dave, whatever you're planning, make sure they come onto your land voluntarily. Don't lure them in. Once they're there by choice, it's on them. When I hung up, I already had the bones of a plan. The next call was to engineer Dave Reeves, not to be confused with me, a guy at the county planning department who was obsessive about records and maps. Dave, I said, I need every document related to Magnolia Heights development, especially Lot 47, Isabella Jones's property. Easements, boundary acknowledgments, anything she signed. Give me a day, he said. I'll dig. Tuesday morning, he called back, voice practically buzzing. David, you're going to love this. When Magnolia Heights was developed, the county required the builder to get boundary acknowledgments from every adjacent property owner. Your father signed one in 2010, confirming the exact property line. He paused, then dropped the bombshell. And here's the kicker. You ever notice how sometimes the universe gives you exactly what you need? If you're patient enough to set the stage, that was me on the morning of October 9th. Every camera was in place, every document ready, every inch of my property marked and legal. All that was left was for Isabella Jones to walk right into the trap she built for herself. At exactly 1:58 p.m., I saw that familiar white Lexus roll up my driveway, gleaming like it owned the sun. Behind it, a silver Honda followed nervously, carrying two faces I recognized, Mark Stevens and Carol Reed, both HOA board members. Good people, not bullies, just caught in the orbit of one. Isabella stepped out first, of course. Perfect cream-colored pantsuit, sunglasses that probably cost more than my tractor tires, and that same smug air like she was descending from a private jet instead of stepping onto my farm. She didn't even glance at the no parking sign before planting her Lexus dead center in my equipment yard, right in front of the barn entrance, smack in the middle of an active operations zone. The audacity? Beautiful. Predictable, too. I walked out to meet them, keeping my tone polite. Mrs. Jones, Mr. Stevens, Mrs. Reed. Thanks for coming. Isabella didn't waste a single second. Mr. Wilson, she said, sharp and rehearsed. We're here to discuss your compliance with a fence violation notice. I trust you prepared the removal plan. Actually, I said, holding back a grin, I prepared documentation proving there is no violation. If you'll come inside, I've got everything laid out. I prefer to inspect the fence line first, she snapped, pointing toward the eastern boundary, since that's the actual issue. Of course, I nodded, but you'll need to move your vehicle first. It's parked in an active work zone. She didn't even look at it. It's fine where it is. This won't take long. Ma'am, I said evenly, that's a designated equipment area. I've got machinery moving through. Mr. Wilson, she cut me off, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. I'll park wherever I need to park to conduct official HOA business. Now, shall we proceed, or are you going to waste more time? Mark and Carol exchanged uneasy glances. Mark spoke up softly. Isabella, maybe we should just move the car. It'll take 30 seconds. The car is fine, Mark, she snapped. Mr. Wilson is stalling. I raised my hands. Your choice. But I did warn you. We started walking toward the fence line. Isabella trailed close behind me, radiating confidence. The kind that comes right before free fall. Mrs. Jones, I asked casually, when you inspected the fence Monday morning, did you bring a surveyor? Her stride faltered just a bit. I conducted a visual inspection based on HOA records. Visual inspection, I repeated, at 6 a.m, right after you drove your SUV through my fence. She froze mid-step. I have no idea what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone and played the video, the one showing her Lexus tearing through my fence, her getting out, taking photos like a crime scene investigator. The color drained from her face. That's edited, she stammered. Fake. You can't. It's time-stamped, I said calmly. High definition, and already with the sheriff's department. Deputy Rodriguez filed a report Monday afternoon. Mark stepped forward, staring at the screen. Isabella, did you actually drive through his fence? Of course not. This is obviously manipulated. Ma'am, I interrupted. I've also got your email from that same morning claiming you discovered a violation during your inspection. You want to explain how you inspected a fence you'd already destroyed. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Carol took a step back, her face pale. The silence hung heavy in the humid Louisiana air. Finally, Isabella straightened her shoulders. This is a distraction, she snapped. The real issue is your fence's encroachment on the public easement. I have photographic evidence. Evidence you took while trespassing on my property. I said, after destroying my fence. I pulled a folded paper from my pocket. This is my property survey from 2021. Professionally done. Filed with the county. My fence sits 3 feet inside my property line. No encroachment. No violation. Surveys can be wrong, she muttered. This one isn't, I said. And here's the kicker, Mrs. Jones. When you bought your property in 2018, you signed a boundary acknowledgement agreement. You explicitly agreed that my boundary was legally established and could not be disputed. That one hit like a bullet. I signed no such. Engineer Dave has a document inside my kitchen. I interrupted. Your signature, right there on the county filing. You acknowledge my land as mine. 6 years later, you try to change it by destroying my fence and fabricating a violation. The silence that followed was glorious. Mark broke it, his voice shaky. Isabella, if you sign that, we could be liable for harassment. Mark, be quiet, she snapped. This man is... What I am, I said evenly, is done being harassed. I took a slow step closer. For 6 months, you've sent letters, threats, fines. Try to force me to follow rules that don't even apply to me. Then you vandalized my property and called it a code violation. And now here you are on my land, still acting like you own it. Her eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me? I smiled. No, ma'am. I'm informing you. She squared her shoulders, voice trembling with rage. This meeting is over. I'd like you to leave my property. I didn't flinch. Not until we resolve this, Mrs. Jones. You're trespassing. Her eyes narrowed. Leave. Now. Then Unbelievably, she smiled. Make me? That was the moment I knew I had her. I pulled out my phone and dialed. Jorge? Yeah. We've got a vehicle blocking the equipment yard. White Lexus. Owner's refusing to move it. Go ahead and relocate it. Standard protocol. Across the yard. Jorge gave me a thumbs up and climbed into the Caterpillar loader. The diesel engine roared to life, low and thunderous, vibrating through the ground. Isabella's smirk evaporated. What do you think you're doing? She shouted over the noise. I'm not touching it. I said calmly, my employee is relocating an illegally parked vehicle that's obstructing operations. Perfectly legal, on private property. This is insane, she screamed. Mark, Carol, call the police. Mark already had his phone in hand, but his eyes were locked on the loader, fascination flickering across his face. Jorge eased the machine forward, the massive steel forks lowering until they kissed the ground beneath the Lexus. Mr. Wilson, if you touch my vehicle... Not touching it, I interrupted. With surgeon-like precision, Jorge slid the forks beneath the frame, exactly under the lift points. The hydraulics hissed, and slowly, almost delicately, the Lexus began to rise. 6 inches. 1 foot. 2. Put it down. Isabella's voice cracked. Put down my car right now. She ran toward the loader, heels clacking on the concrete, arms flailing like she could stop 3 tons of machinery by sheer willpower. The Lexus kept rising. 4 feet. 5. 6. Balanced perfectly on the forks, gleaming in the sun. I gave Jorge a small nod. He stopped to lift around 8 feet, high enough to make a point, low enough to be safe. This is destruction of property. This is theft, she shrieked. This is property management. I said, steady as stone. Your car was in an active work zone. Signs are right there. I pointed at the bright yellow board that read, active operations area, no parking. Unauthorized vehicles will be relocated. I didn't see any sign. Willful ignorance isn't a legal defense, Mrs. Jones. The loader rumbled forward, carrying her car gently through the air. Isabella chased after it, screaming herself hoarse, while Mark and Carol stood frozen. Mark had his phone out, recording. I couldn't tell if it was for evidence or entertainment. Jorge lowered the Lexus in the middle of the dirt lot. Perfectly balanced, sunlight glinting off the hood. Through the window, I could see Isabella's leather portfolio and her phone still in the cup holder, everything untouched. This is kidnapping, she yelled, completely unraveling. Your vehicle isn't a person, I replied evenly. It's being relocated for safety reasons. Call the police, she barked at Mark. He hesitated. Yeah, I'm calling. Before the call even connected, a pickup truck rolled up the driveway. Marcus stepped out, retired deputy badge on his belt, camera slung around his neck. Afternoon, David, he said casually. Everything okay here? Hey, Marcus, I said, just moving an illegally parked vehicle. You remember Mrs. Jones, right? She pounced. Officer, this man has illegally seized my vehicle. Arrest him immediately. Marcus looked up at the Lexus, then at the signs, then back at her. Ma'am, I'm retired, so I can't arrest anyone. But from what I can see, this looks like a property owner managing his land. Managing? He's holding my car hostage. Is your car on his property? I was invited here for a meeting. And did you park in a no-parking zone after being warned? She stuttered. That sign, this is his fault. Before anyone could say more, Mark hung up his phone. Police are on their way, he said quietly. They'll take statements from everyone. Perfect, I replied. I've got documentation ready. Video of her destroying my fence, her written admission and the signed boundary agreement from 2018. Her eyes went wild. You can't show them that. That's private property footage. Completely legal, I said. Louisiana's a one-party consent state. Right then, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the driveway. Deputy Rodriguez stepped out, glanced up at the Lexus suspended midair, and visibly fought back a smile. Mr. Wilson. Mrs. Jones. Want to tell me what's going on? Isabella exploded into a monologue, half rage, half desperation. This man destroyed my property. He held me against my will. He stole my vehicle. Rodriguez raised a hand. Mrs. Jones, is it your car up there? Yes. And where was it parked before he moved it? She pointed toward the yard. Right there, where I had every right to park. He walked over, eyeing the giant no parking signs. Did you see these when you parked? That's irrelevant. It's extremely relevant, ma'am. Silence. Rodriguez turned to me. Mr. Wilson, why'd you relocate the vehicle? It was blocking my equipment barn during active operations. I asked her politely to move it. She told me, make me. So I did, safely. No damage. Rodriguez nodded. Makes sense. And Mrs. Jones, he said, flipping a page in his notepad, you're here because... He's violating HOA regulations with his fence. He frowned. This property isn't part of your HOA, correct? Her mouth opened, and nothing came out. Thought so, he said. This about that vandalism report from Monday? Yes, I said. She destroyed 20 meters of my fence. I've got video, the report, everything. Rodriguez nodded. Mrs. Jones, I'll need you to come down to the station for questioning. The DA's reviewing charges for criminal mischief and trespassing. This is absurd. I am the HOA president. Ma'am, he said gently, your title doesn't exempt you from property law. He turned to me. Mr. Wilson, could you lower the vehicle so she can drive it to the station? Of course. I signaled Jorge. The loader hissed softly as it lowered the Lexus back onto solid ground. Not a single scratch. Jorge stepped out, gave me a thumbs up. Isabella rushed to inspect it, running her hand along the paint, checking every inch. Finding nothing, she climbed in, fuming. Rodriguez leaned down to her window. Mrs. Jones, I'll follow you to the station. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. She didn't answer. Just threw the car in gear and sped off, gravel spraying behind her tires. Mark and Carol walked over slowly, faces pale. Mr. Wilson, Mark said, I had no idea she did all this. The vandalism, the fake violations, none of it was approved by the board. I figured as much, I said. You too seem reasonable. Carol nodded. We're calling an emergency board meeting. This is completely unacceptable. Mark exhaled, then laughed quietly. That was honestly the most amazing thing I've ever seen. The look on her face when the car went up. Even Carol cracked a smile. She's been unbearable for months. Maybe this will humble her. Marcus strolled over, grinning from ear to ear. Dave, I've been in law enforcement 30 years, he said. And that was the most legally perfect screw I've ever seen. Marcus was still grinning when he said it. That was the cleanest takedown I've ever seen. You stayed inside the law, gave fair warnings, and handled it by the book. With that Monday video and her written admission, she's cooked. Engineer Dave stepped out of the house, folder still in hand, shaking his head with a laugh. Did you even need these? Guess not, I said. The threat of them was enough. He chuckled. Next time you need county records for psychological warfare, I'm your guy. When everyone finally left, the silence of the farm felt almost holy. I walked the boundary line. The broken fence still standing like a scar, the loader resting in the equipment yard, the same spot where Isabella's white Lexus had hovered like a warning sign. I thought about the look on her face when she realized I'd actually done it. When her power evaporated, her confidence cracked, and for the first time, she was the one forced to follow the rules. And I smiled. The next 2 weeks were chaos. In the best way. Deputy Rodriguez kept me updated. The DA had officially filed charges. Criminal mischief, trespassing, and false reporting. Isabella's lawyer tried to claim she was acting as HOA president conducting an inspection, but that defense crumbled the second the prosecutor held up her 2018 boundary acknowledgement, complete with her signature. She'd known the truth all along, before it ever reached trial. She took a plea deal, 6 months probation, mandatory anger management, and $3,000 restitution for my fence. But the real justice? That came from her own kingdom. 3 days after what the neighborhood now called the Lexus incident, Mark Stevens called me. David, just a heads up. Emergency HOA meeting tonight about Isabella. He paused. Words gotten out. Tom's been telling people what she did, and now everyone's talking. I didn't attend, but Tom filled me in later. Isabella walked into that boardroom expecting to defend herself. Instead, she walked into a firing squad of stories. Mrs. Patterson from Lot 12, fined $500 for the wrong mailbox color. The Kowalskis, threatened with a lawsuit over a basketball hoop. Mr. Harrison, denied solar panels because they were aesthetic violations, then fined for grass 2/10 of an inch too tall. Story after story. 15 homeowners, each one exposing her pettiness, her control, her absolute misuse of power. Then came Dave, my engineer, with the evidence. The video, the forged violation email, her signed boundary document. The room went silent. When the vote was called, it wasn't even close. 34 in favor, 0 opposed. Isabella was done. She stood, glared around the room, and hissed, "You're all fools. You'll regret this." Then she walked out, and for the first time, Magnolia Heights exhaled. The board immediately made Carol Reed interim president. 2 days later, she showed up at my farm, holding a handwritten apology letter and a basket of local honey and preserves. "Mr. Wilson," she said softly, "on behalf of Magnolia Heights, I'm deeply sorry for Isabella's behavior. We hope to rebuild a better relationship." I nodded. "Carol, I never had a problem with the HOA, only with one person who didn't understand her limits." She smiled. "Well, she's no longer in a position to abuse them." But then the story took another turn. While reviewing Isabella's old files, the board discovered she'd been pocketing fines, charging personal expenses to the HOA, even billing a vacation as conference travel. Within a week, they filed a civil suit for embezzlement and fraud. For someone who'd loved rules, she'd broken just about every one that mattered. 3 weeks later, I got a call from a real estate agent. "Mr. Wilson, my client, Isabella Jones, would like to make an offer on your property." I laughed out loud. "You're joking." "No, sir. She's offering $2.5 million for your 50 acres. It was well above market value." "Let me guess," I said. "She wants to subdivide it." "I'm not privy to her plans," the agent said carefully. I smiled. "Tell Mrs. Jones my property isn't for sale. Not for any price. And if she contacts me again directly or through anyone else, I'll get a restraining order." 2 days later, another agent called. Different name, different company. Same hidden hand. I checked the records. The company was tied to Isabella's husband. That was it. My lawyer sent cease and desist letters to all of them. The call stopped. A month later, a for sale sign went up outside her house. Tom called me grinning. "She's moving. Nobody in the neighborhood will even talk to her now. She'd been kicked out of her yoga class and her book club." The house sold 6 weeks later to a young couple with 2 kids. I brought them a basket of fresh sugarcane as a welcome gift. They told me the previous owner left in a hurry. I bet she did. 5 months after the fence incident, I ran into Mark at the hardware store. He was buying mulch. "David, how's the farm?" "Good," I said. "New fence is stronger. Reinforced posts. Better wire. If anyone tries to drive through this one, their car won't survive." He laughed. "I don't think you'll have that problem anymore. Carol's doing great. Fair rules, actual community spirit. It's like night and day." I nodded. "That's how it should have been all along." He shifted his cart. "You know, a lot of us wanted to thank you. You showed people that we could say no. You gave us permission to stand up." I hadn't thought of it that way. I wasn't trying to start a revolution. I was just protecting my land. But maybe, in doing that, I helped everyone else protect theirs too. When the new fence went up that November, I did it right this time. Treated lumber. Reinforced posts. LED motion lights every 20 feet. 3 new security cameras. Total cost, $8,500. Isabella's restitution check covered every penny, with $5,500 left over. I used that to finally pave the driveway I'd been putting off for 2 years. So, in the end, Isabella had paid, literally, to improve the very property she'd tried to destroy. And that, I decided, was the most satisfying boundary lesson of all. The irony hit me one afternoon as I stood beside the brand-new fence. The very property Isabella had tried so hard to diminish was now stronger, brighter, and better than ever. She'd paid for the repairs, too. The restitution from her case covered every board, every screw, even the motion lights that now glowed softly along the property line. In a strange way, Isabella had financed the improvements she fought so hard to destroy. By December, her criminal case wrapped up, 6-month probation complete, fines paid, and anger management done. Word spread that she'd moved to a small condo in Baton Rouge. No HOA there, just a quiet building with a management company she had no power over. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. The HOA civil lawsuit settled out of court. She repaid nearly $47,000 in embezzled funds and bogus expenses, and several homeowners got refunds for fines she'd issued unlawfully. By January, it was like she'd vanished. Under Carol's new leadership, Magnolia Heights transformed. They rewrote the bylaws, added oversight rules, term limits, and an appeals process for violations. Carol even asked me to review the boundary sections to make sure they were fair. Together, we crafted something balanced, something just, she called it the Isabella Prevention Act. I laughed, but honestly it fit. Soon, the tension between my farm and the neighborhood turned into genuine connection. Parents brought their kids by to see how sugarcane grows. A retired couple started walking their dog along my fence every morning, dropping off coffee as thanks. In March, the elementary school invited me to give a talk on agriculture. One little girl asked, "Mr. Wilson, why do you love your farm so much?" I thought about my grandfather, how he bought this land with everything he had, how my father expanded it and passed it to me with one simple promise. Don't let anyone take what we built. It's not just land, I told her. It's family. It's history. It's proof that if you take care of something and stand up for it, it'll take care of you too. That moment stuck with me. By summer, the whole saga had become a local legend. The time David Wilson lifted the HOA lady's car with sugarcane loader. Each retelling got wilder, the loader taller, the car higher, Isabella's screams louder. I didn't correct anyone. Let them have their story. Because the truth wasn't about a car or a fence. It was about boundaries, about respect, about standing firm when someone keeps crossing the line. I never enjoyed humiliating Isabella, but I didn't regret it either. I'd tried everything: kindness, patience, paperwork, the law, and none of it worked. She only stopped when the consequence became something she couldn't ignore. Sometimes that's the only language people understand. Months later, one quiet August evening, I stood by the fence watching the sunset bleed gold across the cane fields. My phone rang, an unknown number. Mr. Wilson. A familiar, hesitant voice said, "This is Isabella Jones." I froze. She told me she'd been in real therapy, not the court-ordered kind, that she was learning to let go, to stop trying to control everything. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said softly. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For all of it. The fence, the lies, everything. You were right, and I needed that wake-up call. I hated you for it, but it made me change." I didn't know what to say. After a pause, I told her, "I hope your fresh start goes well." "Thank you," she said. "Goodbye, Mr. Wilson." The line went silent, and for the first time since all this began, I felt peace. Not forgiveness, exactly, but closure. The chapter had ended. The farm was still mine. The fence stood strong. The cane shimmered under the setting sun. And I knew, sometimes, protecting what matters means standing your ground, even when it feels extreme. My grandfather would have approved. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with someone who kept pushing until you had to push back? Someone who mistook your kindness for weakness? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. I share stories like this every week. Real people, real conflicts, real justice. Because sometimes the good guys do win. And when they do, They remind the world where the line really is.